Hey Mama, welcome to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gibbs, wife, mama of 3, and doctor of the PhD kind. On this podcast, we talk honestly about high achievement, burnout, and what it looks like to lead well across home, work, and self. So if you're an ambitious mother scholar who's quietly exhausted by the pace you've been keeping and starting to realize that survival isn't the same as success, this podcast is for you. Mrs. Mummy PhD began during my own PhD journey as a wife and mama. Today, as a postdoctoral scholarly mama working across 2 leadership roles, this work has evolved. It's no longer just about finishing the PhD well, it's about creating sustainable ways of learning, leading, and living at any stage of your journey without losing yourself in the process. If you're ready to move from survival to restoration, you're in the right place. Let's begin. These are our journeys of becoming. Hey Mama, welcome back to the podcast. I don't know about you, but I am beginning to be in my element. I love springtime and I love summertime. Yes, I love Christmas. I do. Favorite time of year. But when the weather starts to warm up, the sun is out, the flowers are blooming. Oh my goodness, I am completely in my element. So this is my second favorite time of year after Christmas, probably. And yeah, it's just a really lovely season. And of course, leading on to summer, which is again a beautiful season. So I am in my element. I am thinking about the garden. I'm thinking about just changing up lots of things. We've been like decluttering and it just felt so good. So I don't know what part of the world you're in listening to this. I know we've got listeners all over the world, over 700 cities listening to this podcast. And so I don't know what kind of weather you're experiencing right now where you are, but if you are in the season of spring, I definitely get it. But yeah, what we really wanted to get into in today's episode is talking about leading ourselves as scholarly mamas, because quite often, especially as a PhD student, you feel like, you don't have that agency or you are at the mercy of your advisors and supervisors. But really, one of the things that I really learned when I was on my PhD journey was really learning to be a leader, really learning to lead. And that began with leading myself. And that's a skill that is useful even beyond your PhD, right? As a mama, this is an essential skill to be able to lead yourself so that you can be the leader that your family, that your kids need you to be. And so in today's episode, I'm going to talk about really the importance of filling our cups first, filling our scholarly mama cups first, before we sort of pour into everyone else, because in order to lead well, you need to first be able to lead yourself, and you can't lead yourself from a place of depletion. So we're going to talk about leadership in today's episode. We're going to talk about leading oneself and filling one's cup first as scholarly mamas. So let me ask you something. When was the last time that you did something just for you? Just for you, not something for your kids, not something for your husband or your partner, not something for your PhD, not something for your colleagues or your students if you teach, like not for any of these various responsibilities that you have, but just something for you. When is the last time that you did something just for you? So if you had to pause to think about this, I think you're in the right place. I think this episode is for you, because today, again, like I said, we're talking about one of the most overlooked but essential principles if you want to thrive as a scholarly mama, and that is filling your own cup first. So if you have attended my live webinar, you would know that I talk about the importance of filling your cup and the importance of not having these leaky buckets where you're pouring that water into your big bucket of all the things that you kind of deal with. But there's so many holes in that bucket that everything is just leaking out. So even though on the surface it looks like you're pouring water into this bucket or into this big cup, it has so many holes in it that everything is going everywhere. All of the responsibilities are draining you of the energy that you're putting into yourself, and you have nothing left for you. And I just feel like that is not the place where leaders thrive. That is not the place where real leaders emerge and do their best work. It just isn't. And as scholarly mamas, we're constantly navigating the demands of rigorous academic work, raising our little humans. We are also managing a million other things in between. Maybe we've got lots of commitments at work. We are juggling charitable activities that we may be involved in. And, being a scholarly mama is a role that requires us to really be present, really be strong, really be resilient. But here's the truth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And I know that we hear that so much that I almost wonder whether it's now lost its sting. The fact that we hear, oh, we can't pour from an empty cup. We can't pour from an empty cup. But what does that actually mean? If you are constantly running on fumes and running on empty and depleted and tired and overwhelmed, how can you expect to be the leader that your family and your field, your area of impact, how can you expect to be a leader in any of that? I know that many of us struggle, myself included, many of us struggle with this because we feel guilty for just, making ourselves a priority. We are often putting ourselves at the bottom of our priority list, and we feel that we need to be all things to all people all the time. I know you've heard me say this a million times, but what if I told you that prioritizing yourself isn't taken away from your family or your work? What if by pouring into your cup and filling that cup and not having this leaky bucket where everything is draining you, what if you plug some of those holes and actually prioritize yourself, actually really genuinely fill your cup? What if I said that that wasn't actually taken away from your family or your work or your research or your PhD? What if that was making you a better scholarly mama? What if that was allowing you to show up and be present with your kids and your family, your spouse, your partner? What if that was actually allowing you to do truly innovative work? What if? What if it was actually making you better on both fronts? What if? And so this idea of filling our cup first, even though, yes, as mamas, thinking about it might make you feel guilty or make you feel selfish and all that, what if that didn't have to be the case? So what if you actually got to fill your cup first? What if you could plug some of those holes and actually fill your cup? I remember when I was feeling very overwhelmed. I felt this way a couple times on my journey, and there were times where I felt like I wasn't doing enough. In fact, I was reading a post recently in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in, and the person was talking about how academia often makes you feel like you're not good enough. Even when you're doing the best you can, it feels like it's never enough. And I thought about that for a long time because I thought, this is even like a double whammy for scholarly mamas, because if you are feeling that way in your academic world, you're feeling that you're not good enough no matter what you do, it's a cycle of critique, it's a cycle of failures, it's a cycle of challenges, it's a cycle of rejection, not getting, the outcome that you may want, or failed experiments. You're just so exposed to this sentiment of not feeling like you're good enough. And if you are feeling that in your sort of scholarly world, and then as a mom, the guilt kicks in, you feel like you're not doing enough with the kids, you're not spending enough time, they're growing up, and you're focused on so many other things and not being present with them. How could you be present with them? Because you've got to, show up, at 300% at work or what have you. when you are experiencing both of those feelings of not feeling good enough or inadequacy from so many different fronts, where does that leave us? That leave us feeling even more and more depleted. That leaves us feeling like, well, how can I get out of this constantly spinning vortex where I am either doing too much, still not feeling enough, and then feeling guilty for not doing enough, and then that goes into feeling like we're not enough, and it's just a vicious cycle that leads to nowhere. So what does actually filling your cup first mean? We hear it a lot, but what does it actually really mean? Now, again, this may have different meanings, individual interpretations, and I get that everybody's situation is different. I think for me, it feels like this idea of filling my cup first means really getting clear on what my priorities are. What are my priorities? And for me, those priorities in terms of filling my cup first center around my well-being, physically, emotionally, mentally, so that I can show up in every aspect of my life. I can actually pour into some of these cups that I have in a way that doesn't deplete me, because I've plugged the holes and I am actually being very intentional about where I am pouring that energy, where I'm putting my effort. And I think that's the difference. We're not pouring into a leaky bucket with lots of holes and energy is going everywhere and people are able to drain us of the little bit of energy we've got left. Instead, we are plugging those holes so that we can fill our cup intentionally. We can actually fill it up, and then we can be super intentional and purposeful about where we are pouring our energy. What cups are we filling with the energy that we've got? And I think that's the real essence of becoming a leader of ourselves first, that we are able to purposefully consider where we want to pour our energy, that we're being strategic about how we do so, and that we are not allowing other holes and leaks to drain us of our energy. And I think that's one of the reasons why I talked last week about letting go of expectations. If you want to reach that altitude, if you want to be able to take off and fly as a Scully mama, you are going to have to be really honest with yourself about what expectations, what loads you are willing to carry with you on your flight. Where do you want to be pouring your energy? How can you conserve energy where needed, where necessary, so that you can actually take flight, right? And this is not selfish. This is not thinking about oneself only. This is not what this is about. It is strategic, because you are one person. And again, I spoke about this with a friend recently about how, we can't necessarily replace time, but we can replenish our energy. And that's true. But at the same time, we need to be strategic about where we spend it. I talk about, I have this concept of how we spend our energy is really very much linked to how we prioritize ourselves and how we lead ourselves. And so this is all about leadership more than it is about being selfish. It's about strategic self-leadership. And that's the shift that I want you to embrace today, that you're not just a PhD student. You are not just a mama. You're not just anything, right? You are a leader. And the first person that you have to lead in order to lead well is yourself. And so I want you to think about this. Think about the most successful leaders that are in your life, whether those people are in academia, whether those people are in business, whether those people are parents that you admire. They are not operating from a place of depletion. I observed a lot of things when I was doing my PhD. I observed some of the ways that people around me led I observed it, I internalized it. I really, got deep into watching very, very carefully how people responded, how people, led themselves, how people interacted with other people in a position of leadership. And one of the things that I notice is that the people who I was drawn to were people who were very authentic, effective leaders first of themselves, and then in their leadership capacity in work. And so those are the people that I was drawn to. And when I analyze, why was I drawn to those people? Why did I want to be around those people? Why did I want to be led by those people? And I think that came down to the fact that they showed me what good leadership looked like. They showed me that before you can lead other people, you have to be able to lead yourself. You have to know, you have to really get clear on your boundaries. You have to be willing to delegate. You have to know how to behave and act and respond from a place of empathy and authenticity. You have to first lead by example. And so that was my kind of early introduction to this idea of becoming a leader of myself first before I can lead anyone. And that includes my kids. At the end of the day, like if they don't see me setting the example in how I manage myself, how I manage my time, how I show up for myself and show up for the goals that I set for myself, then how can I expect them to be leaders of themselves? How can I expect them to step into their own creative self-leadership? And it's so funny because I was watching a video recently, and I was talking about, it was a child psychologist, and he was talking about how we should manage our kids when they've got, problems and challenges. And he was saying that the best thing we can do for our kids is to empower them to problem solve, to empower them to be creative with solving their own problems, be creative with leading themselves. And so the example he gave was talking about, his kids left their jacket at home or their PE kit at home. He wasn't going to be running to the school to bring it, because he wanted his kids to realize that they've got to show up for themselves first. Because the truth is, nobody's coming to save you. Nobody is coming to tell you what to do in every situation, or to tell you what's the best thing to do if this happens or that happens. You need to get to a place where you are confident in your own self-leadership, where you are not operating from a place of burnout and overwhelm and depletion, but you are managing your energy in a way that allows you to lead well. So when you look at these successful leaders, when I look at people that I admired and that I aspire to be like, I realize that their energy and their mindset and their well-being, for them, they recognize that those things directly impacted their ability to inspire, their ability to create, their ability to make meaningful contributions to society and to their work and to their mission in this world. And so the same thing applies to all of us, right? The idea that if we want to inspire and create and make meaningful contributions, we need to pay attention to our energy expenditure. We need to pay attention to our energy, our mindset, our priorities, our well-being, and recognizing that these things will affect how we show up for ourselves and others. But here's the thing. I know that many of us experience things like imposter syndrome, feeling like we're not good enough. I mentioned this earlier, either in academia or as a mama. And we often question whether we are falling short, not doing enough, measuring ourselves against unrealistic expectations. If you want to hear me talk about expectations, you can head back to last week's episode. But really carrying along these unrealistic heavy loads of expectations. And by the way, as I mentioned in that episode, these expectations can be coming from so many places. They can be coming from other people, our supervisors, our friends, our colleagues, but it could also be coming from old versions of ourselves. Before we had to juggle all the things that we're juggling now, the fact that we were able to work to a deadline literally the night before, stay up all night and do it. And now we've got kids and we wonder how on earth we can't do that anymore because things have changed. And so we can't approach new problems with old strategies. We need to adapt. We need to be willing to change our approach to things and to challenge old mindsets and old approaches because maybe the situation is different, right? So leadership, especially self-leadership, doesn't mean perfection. Again, this is another thing that kind of shows up when we are trying to lead ourselves. Like we think that leadership means trying to be perfect, and it doesn't. It means showing up as your best self, even when you're imperfect, even in that imperfection, even when you are still figuring things out, because great leaders don't have it all figured out. They trust themselves that they can manage the situation when it arises. And that is the difference. It isn't about planning everything to a T and being so rigid and inflexible that when situations change, you're not even adaptable. That's not leadership. Leadership is being adaptable, being able to believe within yourself that you have what it takes to adapt and manage a situation when it arises. And that's at work, that's at home. You can't plan everything out to perfection. And that's okay because we are not perfect human beings, right? As scholarly mamas, we are not perfect human beings. And so it's okay if you are still figuring things out. It doesn't mean that you are not a good leader. And so when you lead yourself by first prioritizing filling your own cup, setting boundaries, carving out space for personal growth and developing yourself, you really set the tone for everything else. Your kids, they'll see a mama who values herself, who invests in herself, who, believes in herself, who is able to lead herself. Your colleagues or your mentors, your supervisors, your advisors, they will recognize that you are able to manage both your ambition and your well-being. And of course, your PhD work, your research, your work in your paid work, that will benefit from you having a more clear, a more focused, a more self-compassionate mindset. You are able to show up and actually get your work done because you're not leaking energy from all these holes. You are able to fill your cup. And so this requires an identity shift, as I mentioned so many times on this podcast, that you have got to show up as the person who has achieved the goal you are trying to achieve. And part of the reason why that is important is because, again, it comes back to this idea of self-trust. You believe. When you believe in yourself, you have self-trust. You have confidence. When you believe in yourself, you show up differently. Believe me. I can testify to this, and I'll share some stories about this in future episodes, but I can absolutely testify to this, that this is an identity shift. It is so easy to lose ourselves in the whirlwind of, responsibilities and hats and commitments that we have. It's easy to get caught up in that vortex. And it's easy to feel like you're just a mama or you're just a PhD candidate or you've got to choose between the two, or, your personal interests and your dreams, they just get put on the back burner, and maybe you can't finish this PhD because you've got to focus on being a mama, or maybe you'll come back to family life later on because you've got to focus on your PhD. I don't believe that those things need to be mutually exclusive. And I am a personal testament to that. You do not have to neglect your family in order to do your PhD well. You don't have to pour everything into this PhD and neglect your family. You don't have to choose. But first, before you can do any of those things, before you can pour into any of those things, how are you filling your own cup? How are you filling your own cup? So I want to challenge you to think about one thing that you absolutely love doing before your PhD, before you became a mama, that you have not made space for lately. Is it writing? Do you love writing? I've got children's books. I absolutely got so much joy and pleasure out of writing those. Is it dancing? Well, I'm not a dancer. I wish I was, because I do love dancing, but I'm not that good at it. But is it that for you? Is it painting? Is it reading? Is it gardening? I love gardening, by the way. Is it that? How can you begin to reconnect with that part of yourself? How can you begin to find space for that so that you can fill your own cup? Because the more you embrace this idea of self-leadership, the more you can reclaim the identity of the person who shows up and achieves the goals. And also, the more you embrace this idea of self-leadership, the more you teach your kids by example what it really means to pursue a life that is purposeful, that is fulfilling, that is impactful. Because you are going to show up differently. And so my question for you today is, how are you filling up your own cup? Right? I talk about this a lot in my PhD with Purpose Webinar. How are you filling your own cup? What is one thing that you can do this week to pour into yourself, that you can nourish the you that's there waiting to be nourished and cared for and loved? So whether that's taking a mindful break, whether that is setting clear boundaries, or whether that is reconnecting with an old passion that you have outside of PhD life, outside of motherhood, whatever that is, how are you going to be filling your cup? And if setting boundaries presents a challenge for you, I want you to think about this little exercise that you can do. Maybe consider 3 things that you can say no to this week in order to create a little space for yourself. Can you reschedule a meeting? Can you delegate a task? Can you ask your husband, your spouse, your partner to step up and do something that you normally would do, just to give you a little bit of breathing room? Can you outsource something that you would normally do just to make space for yourself? Maybe that's having to pay for someone to help with something that you would normally do. Can you do that? Maybe it's paying for an extra day of childcare so that you can have a day to just recover and rest. How can you set a boundary this week to allow you to show up for yourself and fill your cup? And if you are craving a community of mamas who really get this, who understand this juggling act that's so unique, the struggles, the victories, we get all of it. We are here with you, right? I want to invite you to join us inside Scholarly Mamas. Here we're going to be talking about all of this and more: leadership, mindset, self-care, thriving as a scholarly mama. Because here's the thing, you don't have to do this journey alone. You don't have to do this journey alone. I know when people think about leadership, and obviously I talked a lot about self-leadership, it feels like a lonely pilgrimage. But it doesn't have to be. You can step into the leader that you are destined to be alongside other mamas who are doing the same. Because this journey, as much as it is unique to us and to our circumstances, isn't meant to be a unique solo pilgrimage. It's really meant to be in the company of other powerful women who see you and who can remind you that you matter, so that you feel supported and empowered to thrive. So remember that leading yourself first isn't a luxury, it is actually a necessity. This is how you become the doctor, the scholarly mama, the leader that you are meant to be. Because when you do this, you don't just lead your family or your, academic pursuits at your field. You're not just a leader at work or at home, but you're leading an entire generation of future leaders just like you. Just like you. This is what it means to lead well. It begins with you. You are a leader, but you need to step into that identity. You need to show up right now as the leader that you are. And that means even with all the hats you are wearing, even as a PhD student feeling like you don't have any authority, any agency, any say, you are still a leader, because becoming a leader begins with leading ourselves. And so until next time, I'm sending you lots of love and gratitude as always. Remember, you are so worthy of becoming the leader that you are meant to be. Thank you so much for listening. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, I want you to know this. You don't need to have it all figured out before you take your next step. This work is all about learning to lead yourself first in ways that honor your capacity, your work, your home, and yourself without burning out in the process. If you'd like to continue the conversation beyond the podcast, you're warmly invited to join Scholarly Mamas The Letter, a quiet monthly newsletter for mother scholars who value purpose beyond titles, presence at home, and peace within. You can sign up at scholarlymamas.com. And if you're feeling stuck, stretched, or just not where you want to be, you can book a free 30-minute call to help you gain clarity and explore what support might look like in this season to get from where you are to where you want to be. You can also connect with me on social media at Mrs. Mummy PhD, where I share reflections on ambition, motherhood, sustainable self-leadership, all the things, for high-achieving mamas like yourself. This, mama, is the quiet work of scholarly motherhood, and these are our journeys of becoming.